The smell inside the patrol car was an exotic mix of chemical cleaner, stale farts, and Mexican food. My partner, Stanley, tapped her hand against the passenger window in rhythm with the rain. "You know," she said, holding her coffee cup, "the biggest killer of cops is heart disease. All that grease is going to take 20 years off your life." I grumbled dismissively between bites of my burrito. Who would even want 20 more years of my life? Besides, I love this place. But you can buy lunch tomorrow? Stanley scoffed. No one else is open at 1 in the morning. Exactly. Jamesville, Oregon was a one-stoplight town. We were lucky that the little taqueria was open, and doubly lucky that they gave free coffee to cops. The radio crackled. 210 dispatch. I pulled the headset off the dashboard. It was a Wednesday night. Weeknights were usually quiet, but like any other rural town in the Pacific Northwest, we saw our fair share of domestic disturbances and meth head attacks at odd hours. More often than not, the two were related. Dispatch 210, go ahead. We got a 911 call from Camp Explorer off Route 23. The county dispatcher thought she heard someone talking or breathing, but the call dropped immediately. Do you know the place? Yeah, my kids went there. 210, responding. I shifted into gear and pulled onto the road. Hey, we might not have signal up there. Can we get another car or two? Camp Explorer was nestled in a small valley right on the edge of the national forest, and our radios didn't always play nice with the mountains. We were in a bad spot. A dropped 911 call was usually an accident, but if it wasn't, the most likely scenario was a medical emergency, which we weren't exactly equipped for. The nearest hospital was over an hour away. Out here, if someone got hurt, we'd probably have to call in a medevac. Roger, 210. I'll see what I can do. Over. I need this. If you don't hear from us in 2 hours, send everyone. State Police, Fire, EMS, National Guard, Green Berets. Stanley sighed. Let's hope some teenager accidentally dialed 911. Yeah, I mean no. There's no cell signal up there. Someone picked up a landline and made that call. By the time we turned off Route 23, the rain had stopped. The camp was only 30 miles from town, but the last 10 were dirt roads maintained by the Forest Service. I drove slowly and steadily as the headlights cast shadows of fir and cedar branches over the mist rising from the rain-soaked ground. More than once I caught the glint of an animal's eyes at the edge of my vision, where the beams met the thick underbrush lining the roadside. My kids had stayed here a few summers ago, even in the dark. I recognized the entrance, and a few hundred yards later, the Camp Explorer sign and the carved wooden totem. We pulled into the empty visitor parking lot. Nobody home, Stanley said. There was something in her voice. The season's over. Staff parking is this way. I slowly pushed the car forward. I thought about turning on the blue lights, but decided against it. The car passed under a hanging tree branch. It sounded like nails on a chalkboard. The staff parking lot was about a third full. A couple of 20-year-old pickup trucks, some high-mileage SUVs, and a beat-up sedan pretty typical for broke 20-something camp counselors. The trucks were loaded with tools and hardware. End-of-season maintenance, most likely. I turned off the car and killed the headlights. There was enough ambient light through the clouds to make out the outline of the camp office. Full moon. Shouldn't there be lights on? Yeah, I said. There was a lamppost between us and the camp office, but it, along with all the windows, was dark. I tried to reach dispatch, but all I got was static. Maybe a tree fell and knocked out the power? Maybe. But let's take a look. Stay close. We stepped out of the car and started walking toward the office, Stanley to my right, scanning the woods with her flashlight, one hand on her holstered gun. This place is giving me the creeps. Yeah, a few steps from the car, I felt her grip my arm hard. I stopped immediately. Her voice was a whisper. The door. The camp office door wasn't visible from the parking lot, but when we rounded the corner of the building, we saw it had been forced inward. What was left of it hung splintered from the hinges. Something very red and wet was smeared across the green paneling. Kill your light, I whispered. Back to the car. I've got our 6. We both dropped into a crouched walk. my left hand on the back of her shoulder to keep us together while I covered the door with my gun. We reached the side of the car, keeping low. Stanley covered me while I tried the radio again. Just static. What the hell do we do? We need to get out of this canyon and make the call. We need to wait for backup. A deafening scream cut me off. It was close, and very human. Stanley and I snapped our heads toward the parking lot, scanning for anything in the dark woods beyond. But even with the full moon, it was like staring into a black hole. Okay, new plan. Someone's in trouble. Walking straight into a horror movie? Look, we're not about to walk in and ask Freddy Krueger for ID and a breathalyzer. But yeah, we've got a job to do. There was another scream coming from somewhere behind the office. The same voice? I couldn't tell. We ducked behind the patrol car. With Stanley keeping watch, I unlocked and opened the trunk. Like many small towns, Jamesville doesn't have a SWAT team. If we want good equipment, we have to buy it ourselves. We get some surplus gear from the federal government for free, and if we're lucky, maybe a bit of training. We keep what we have in the back of each car. I pulled out our patrol rifles and handed one to Stanley. I could see her hands shaking as she loaded a magazine and chambered a round. You okay? Of course not. The worst violence either of us had seen was a bar stabbing or domestic abuse. Which is bad, no lie, but it happens every day. It's horrible, but it's normal. This whole situation felt wrong, and we both knew it. Stupid question. I leaned my carbine against the bumper and started stripping off my patrol vest, feeling completely exposed until I slid the plate carrier over my head and buckled it. The same one I wore on deployment. In the chest pocket, I touched the outline of my good luck charm, a small silver medallion of St. Michael that my grandfather carried in Normandy. Patron saint of paratroopers, also of police officers. Not that I believed in that sort of thing, but it couldn't hurt. It worked for me, but then again, I never set foot off base during the war. I covered Stanley while she put on her own armor, then handed her helmet over. Both pieces were low-bid Army surplus. Securing my own helmet, I pulled my night vision monocular from its case and slid it onto the mount at the front of my head with a click. Secret weapon, I whispered, tapping the helmet's brim. Where the hell did you get that? Oh, I bought it. Let's check the cars. Fully equipped, we moved to inspect the vehicles in the lot. 5 of them. No one inside, but some had broken windows. Most looked ransacked. For weapons, spare keys. I could see the hood of the nearest car, a beat-up Honda, was unlatched. I lifted it as quietly as possible. Battery cables cut. Radiator hose is slashed. Someone doesn't want anyone leaving. Should we move the car? What if they hit us too? Yeah, good idea. But quietly. Stanley, still wearing her armor, climbed into the driver's seat and, without starting the engine, shifted into neutral. I gave her a push, and carefully, we rolled it back down the road, out of sight from the camp office. We crept forward toward the building. Since I had night vision, I took the lead. We moved the way I'd been taught in the Army, slowly, evenly, side by side. I remembered another lesson, the fatal funnel, and decided to take a wide path around the door. We approached one of the office windows at an angle so I could see most of the room inside. Oh my God. I groaned, feeling my dinner rising in my throat. I forced it back down. What do you see? Stanley hadn't served, but I could tell she was doing what she was supposed to, staying close, keeping her head on a swivel. Body in here. I didn't want to give details. The kid was young, slumped over a desk, his eyes open, staring at the ceiling. His chest had been cut open, vertically like an autopsy, and his organs lay in a pile on the floor, glowing a sickly green in my night vision. His right arm was missing from the shoulder. The entire floor was covered in blood. Still bright and wet. I saw no footprints. The room's clear. Let's go. There was another vocalization coming from somewhere nearby. A deep, guttural sound. Hoo hoo hoo. That didn't sound human. I froze for maybe a full minute, but we had to move forward. Rounding the corner of the building, I could see a row of small cabin staff housing. We slowly approached the nearest one when a flash of movement caught my attention. I froze, spinning toward it, raising my rifle, only to meet a pair of inhuman eyes staring back at me, glowing intensely in my night vision. Stanley sensed my movement and ducked for cover, but I wasn't sure if she had seen anything. I couldn't hear the click of the safety over the sound of my heart pounding in my throat. The coyote was maybe 10 yards away, a 30-pound animal at most, not a monster. I exhaled slowly and tapped Stanley to let her know we were fine as it trotted toward the tree line like nothing had happened. The nearest cabin was, thankfully, blood-free. But it was completely trashed furniture, beds, clothes all ripped and scattered across the single room. No sign of the occupants. Then we heard Ida low, almost imperceptible whimper. I could tell Stanley heard it too. It had to be coming from the next cabin. We approached as silently as possible. The door was closed. I signaled for Stanley to cover me, then I pushed it open. When you clear a room, you have to do it with speed and violence of action. Going through a doorway is the most dangerous thing you can do, so your chances of survival improve if you do it fast. Ideally, you need more than one person to sweep every corner simultaneously, but it was just the two of us, and I needed someone covering me. So naturally, I kicked the door in, cleared the right corner, pivoted through the center of the room, saw the girl, cleared the left corner, caught my boot on the door frame, and went face first into the floor. Stanley spun, rifle ready, and crouched down to try to pull me out. "I'm fine," I choked out and looked up. Stanley probably couldn't see the girl. She was hiding under a table in the darkest corner of the cabin. Young late teens, early 20s, maybe. I could see she was covered in dark bloodstains, but from my compromised position, I couldn't tell if they were hers or not. She had armed herself with what looked like a firewood axe, and her entire body was tense, ready to fight or flee. I pushed up onto my knees, keeping my rifle low. Hey, I whispered. "We're here to help." The girl was completely rigid with fear as I inched closer. "Are you hurt? We're going to get you out of here. Can you tell me you're—" I heard it again. Hoo-hoo. Louder this time, closer, inhuman. I went silent. I saw the girl lift a trembling finger to her lips, an unmistakable gesture. Silence. We sat against the wall for what felt like an hour, rifles trained on the door and the lone window. Only when the girl stopped shaking did I risk a whisper. "Who was that? What was that?" The girl didn't answer. "Okay. We're getting you out of here. But we need to know, is there anyone else we can help?" The girl shook her head and managed to choke out 2 words between ragged sobs. "Everyone's dead." "Okay. Our car's just around the corner. We'll get you to safety, then we'll get more help." A soft blue light flooded the fog. It took me a moment to realize it was coming from the staff parking lot, flashing blue and white. One of ours. Dispatch had sent another car. I looked at Stanley. "I think we have to go now." We got up. Stanley and I walked out the door immediately. I went right. She went left. The girl didn't want to leave the cabin, but my partner wasn't taking no for an answer, pushing her with one hand while holding the rifle with the other. I found the flashing lights of the patrol car disorienting with night vision, so I lifted them. We reached the camp office and positioned ourselves against the wall opposite the parking lot. At that moment, I remembered we had turned off our portable radios for silence. I turned mine back on and called whoever was in the parking lot. Officer Jordan answered. "Reyes, is that you?" "Yeah, it's me," I whispered into the mic. "We're coming out. Turn off your lights." "Repeat?" "I don't understand. Turn off your damn lights. We're coming out." The blue lights stopped flashing, but I could tell the headlights were still on. Whatever, no time to argue. We turned the corner. Dan Jordan and his partner stood casually in the parking lot. "What's going on, Officer Reyes? Why are you all geared up?" I looked at him, slightly stunned. "Did you look at the office?" "No." I stared at him for a moment and let out a long sigh. "We just got here. We found your car in a ditch. Things are fucked up here, Dan." "Well, hold on, start from the— No, listen to me. Get her out of here. Then we need to get back into radio range and call, I don't know, state police, the FBI, everyone. You can't leave." Stanley and I spun around, raising our weapons, Stanley shoving the girl behind her with enough force to knock her to the ground. The figure was illuminated by the headlights of Dan's car. A woman, very tall, arms at her sides, walking toward us. Completely naked, except she was covered in blood from head to toe. Her hair was soaked and matted with it. The transfiguration has only just begun. It's not every full moon just. Stop where you are. Hands up. Now! Stanley was shouting. You must accept the great gift you've been given. The woman kept walking. I said stop. She was yelling now. Keep your creepy naked ass right where it is or I'll blow your head off. Please. The blood-covered woman stopped. It will be much easier for you if you don't resist. I heard it again. The sound from the cabin, but lower, angrier. Behind us, behind Dan. I turned my head. Vaguely aware that Stanley had fired, I saw the flash, and I think I saw the body drop as I turned to look back. Dan was frozen with a dull look of surprise as the thing grabbed him from behind. Half blinded by Dan's car lights, all I could see was a mass of hair, teeth, and claws. It bit into Dan's neck from behind, dug its claws into his stomach, and pulled until he simply came apart in front of me. Then it was leaping across the parking lot. I didn't even have time to aim my weapon before it was on me. Its claws scraped across the front of my vest, throwing me to the ground and cracking the ceramic plate. I hit my right shoulder with a wet snap, tried to lift my rifle but couldn't move my arm. The creature was crouched over me. My legs were pinned beneath it. I still couldn't see it clearly, but I could smell the blood covering it. I could hear the pop-pop of Stanley's carbine firing rapidly into its side. With my right arm useless, I reached with my left, grabbed my knife from its sheath and in a reverse grip stabbed it into the creature's belly with all the strength I had. I yanked the blade out, tearing through fur, skin, and fat. As the thing's claws scraped furiously across my helmet, something the woman had said about the full moon echoed in my head. I dug into my chest pocket, grabbed the St. Michael medallion and pressed it into the wound I had made with my knife. The creature roared in pain and rage. I could feel the silver medallion burning, white-hot in my hand until I couldn't take it anymore and let go. The thing rolled away from me, convulsing, and I started crawling backward, pulling myself out from under it. Finally free, the next moment I felt a hand grab the drag handle on the back of my armor, yanking me to my feet. I turned my head. It was Stanley. She was screaming. Run, damn it. A second later, we were sprinting toward Dan's car. I could barely see ours on the side, wrecked. I couldn't feel my arm. I yelled at Stanley to drive and threw myself into the passenger seat. I looked down and saw Dan's partner, his face just gone. There was no sign of the girl. We were lucky Dan had left his car running. I could see more of the creature silhouetted in the headlights. More than I could count. I was only 3/4 inside the car when Stanley slammed it into reverse, the door smacking against my legs as she yanked me into the seat. She shot backward, whipping the heavy V8 police interceptor into a reverse turn that would have made a stunt driver proud. The next thing I knew, we were spitting gravel behind us on the forest road. I wanted to tell her to slow down before we went off the road, but with the white-hot pain in my shoulder, I couldn't unclench my jaw. Somehow we made it to the highway. We hit the asphalt and Stanley braked hard. The car skidded to a stop. I looked at her rocking in the driver's seat, sobbing. My right arm was burning with pain, and there was so much blood in my eyes that I could barely see. I wanted to say something, anything, but all that came out of my mouth were the remnants of my lunch. The radio crackled. I grabbed the receiver. Help. Officer needs help. Highway 23. I remembered Dan and his partner. The look on his face as he was torn apart. Burned into my mind forever. Again? Say your location? Transmitting. A semi-truck blared its horn as it drove around us, snapping Stanley out of her trance. She pulled us off the road and onto the shoulder. Officers down. Highway 23, mile marker 3334. Explorer camp. They kept us in the hospital for over a month. My shoulder needed surgery, followed by weeks of observation. It took a while before they allowed me to have visitors besides Stanley, who I could tell was getting cabin fever. She spent most of her time in my room, pacing back and forth angrily. Finally, they let me see my family. In week 3, they sent an FBI agent to interview Meat Least. That's what he said he was. He introduced himself, shook my hand, and said he wanted to hear the story. Well, I know this is going to sound crazy, but he laughed. I've heard that before. Don't worry about it. Start from the beginning. Leave nothing out. I told him everything. His face remained friendly, yet unreadable the entire time. What happens now? I asked. Now? You're free to go? He smiled. Really? I mean, what do I tell people? You can tell people whatever you want. He shrugged. It's a free country, but what you'll read in the paper tomorrow will be something like this. 2 of those kids made a pact to kill everyone else and then themselves. Officer Jordan and his partner arrived in the middle of it and, unfortunately, were ambushed and tragically lost their lives. You and your partner arrived sometime later and were attacked by a malnourished, predatory black bear, drawn by the scent of blood. I frowned. It took me a minute to process. I held back from calling it total bullshit. And unofficially, what really happened to us, to those kids? I don't know. He sighed. That's the truth. But we have some very capable people for cases like this. Well, figure out what happened. We'll make sure it doesn't happen again. He looked me in the eyes. You 2 were pretty damn capable yourselves just to be sitting where you are now. Want a job? I looked away. I can't. I have a family. I frowned. Unless saying no gets me thrown into the back of a white van, never to be seen again. In that case, sure. Far from it. The agent chuckled. Besides, I wouldn't want to try. You're stronger than you think, Officer Reyes. Did you ask Stanley? He smiled. She asked us. He shook my hand, put his coat back on, and gave me a card with a number to call in case I remembered anything else. I never saw him again after that. We sold our house, and once my shoulder healed, I took a job in Portland. Being a cop in the big city is different in a lot of ways I don't like, but I hope I never have to step into the woods at night again.